What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the Monday Night Showdown slate in Week 9. Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. This is a live Q&A. I already see some comments in the chat that some people don't like when we go this late. Some people do like when we go this late. So let me know in the chat what you prefer. Obviously, we're going to get the video out sooner rather than later on most days, just the way the timing worked out today. But don't worry, this gives you time to get some questions in, some live questions, and we will answer them as well. You still have an hour and 12 minutes to make lineups, so plenty of time to digest what I'm saying and put it into your lineup. So we'll discuss the injuries that impact the slate. There are some receiver injuries that we need to talk about, low risk lineup construction tips and core plays, and high risk lineup strategies, ideas, and strategies to get you to the top of those biggest contest leaderboards on DraftKings and FanDuel. So again, if you have questions throughout the show, I will answer them periodically between segments. And we'll get going here. Let's see who's in the chat. Matt, DF, David, Bark, Andres, JPT, of course, one old schools, Ed. Appreciate you guys. Say what's up if you're watching. All right, let's start with the injuries here, and we'll start on Tampa Bay side. We got news just maybe 20 minutes ago. So first of all, obviously Mike Evans remains out with his hamstring injury. Chris Godwin is on injured reserve. He is out once again. Jalen McMillan, who I have way too much of in best ball, he is out as well tonight. Could he? I guess he tweaked his hamstring again in practice. That's never a good sign. He is out. They called up Marquez Callaway, who, if you've played fantasy football or have watched NFL for a while, you know the name. Certainly a veteran receiver. He will mix in as well. Sterling Shepard was questionable. He will play. We will get to the usage here in a second on how these receivers were used last week, how we expect them to be used tonight. Once we cover Kansas City's injuries, which the main one is Juju Smith-Schuster remains out. Remember, they traded for DeAndre Hopkins last week. He stepped in, not into a full-time role, although we expect that to expand tonight. And then they have Xavier Worthy, obviously, Mecole Hardman, Justin Watson to go along with it. Other than that, not much else we need to discuss on the injury side of things. Jarrett Wiley is out, ran 4 routes last week. Very minor impact on tonight's game. All right, let's look at the daily plug, occupyfantasy.com. If you are a member of the site, you know this very well. Top plays, strategies, injuries. The biggest thing is contest-specific strategies. But what I do want to show you here are the slate notes. And let's scroll down, make sure you can see it perfectly. Yep, you guys can see that. All right, so if we look at how the routes shook out last week for Tampa Bay and Kansas City. Now, the biggest disclaimer, obviously, is that last week does not necessarily indicate this week. It's a big reason why we use 3-4 week samples for underperforming wide receivers because usage changes, especially as guys come in and out of the lineup. But it's the best we could do, and we could try to extrapolate from what they did last week and make educated decisions based on what the projected ownership is telling us for tonight. So we start with Tampa Bay. So Jalen McMillan, who was out tonight, led the group with 48 routes run last week. K-Dot, their tight end, apparently is now prime Travis Kelce, 45 routes last week. Trey Palmer, 41 routes. Sterling Shepard, 37 routes. Ryan Miller, 18. Raheem Jarrett, shout out Terps, 11. And Payne Durham, their tight end, 3. So now McMillan is out. Shepard, we'll see if he's fully healthy. Only got in one limited practice with his hamstring injury as well. So 37 routes, maybe that's a bit high tonight. But we have basically Palmer, Shepard, Miller, Jarrett as the top 4 receivers. Callaway will mix in as well. Who knows? Maybe he gets more than expected. If we look at projected ownership, let's pull up the Occupy model, occupyfantasy.com, and we sort by salary. We see we have Sterling Shepard. He's still in kind of a weird price range at $5,600. He'll probably still be less than 20% owned. Trey Palmer is the biggest guy here, 34%. Let me make sure you guys can see this. Yeah, you guys can see this. All right, 34% projected ownership. Trey Palmer is going to be the most popular Tampa Bay receiver we expect tonight. But then there's also Ryan Miller at $1,000 on DraftKings. We have him at 8%. I think this is a little low. I don't know if he'll get up to like 20% or anything, but he should be higher than 8% and will be a popular punt as a result. If we look at what these guys did, let's see here. Let's go back to the routes run. If we look at opportunities last week and targets, we see that it was Sterling Shepard, 5 targets, 38 air yards. It was Ryan Miller, despite only 18 routes, 5 targets, 56 air yards. Trey Palmer, despite being the most popular group, just 2 targets last week, 26 air yards. The most productive of these guys over the past couple of years, but wasn't used much last week. Again, doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to be used tonight. But Raheem Jarrett is the most interesting of the group to me. 3 targets, 52 air yards. And we like to talk about propaganda on these shows. There is an insane amount of Raheem Jarrett propaganda, both from Tampa Bay reporters and in the Tampa Bay locker room. They're talking about how this guy has been tough to guard, how he's fighting for a bigger role, and made a big catch late in that game last week. So I would not be shocked at all to see Jarrett have a big bump in targets tonight, a big bump in usage, in playing time. Again, this is going out on the limb because ownership does not dictate this. Industry projections do not dictate this. We have Raheem Jarrett at just 2% projected ownership. You're looking for a really solid tournament play. Raheem Jarrett's my guy, especially as a pivot over Ryan Miller. More expensive than Miller, but also cheaper than Trey Palmer. So just keep that in mind as you're playing tournaments for tonight. Now, if we look at the Kansas City side, remember, this was Hopkins' first week in Kansas City. Just 14 routes for him. Expect that to be ramped up pretty dramatically tonight. Xavier Worthy led the group with 33, tied with Justin Watson. Noah Gray, tight end 2, playing a lot, 26 routes. Kelsey led the group with 40. And then Mecole Hardman got a bump with 14 as well. Jody Fortson, who was with the team a few years ago, came back recently, 9 routes for him. Don't forget about him as a punt play. But I think we'll see Hopkins definitely overtake most of Hardman's routes and probably take a good chunk away from Justin Watson. If we look at targets last week, despite just 14 routes, Hopkins 3 targets, 48 air yards. Xavier Worthy 8 targets, 63 air yards last week. Justin Watson 3 for 20. Mecole Hardman just 1 for 7. Noah Gray 3 for 18. And then Kelsey dominated 12 for 78. So the tight ends are expected to be the most targeted and they're the highest price guys on both teams. So pretty interesting. So again, we expect Hopkins to get the biggest bump here from last week. Let's check in this chat, see what you guys are talking about, see if we got any questions we want to answer here. So Matt says, who is the wide receiver 1? Not counting Otten, which we probably should for the Bucs. Yeah, so it's Palmer, probably by playing time. In terms of targets, it could be any of Palmer, Shepard, Miller, or Raheem Jarrett. So just keep an open mind. Palmer is the most popular on DraftKings. .bet says, avoid Bucky with his injury, or do you think he'll be a full go? Yeah, they basically said they're just managing his toe injury, limited practice, and then they get him in on practice on Fridays. Last week it was, let's pull up DraftKings here, and we look at Tampa Bay running backs. Last week it was Rashad White with, I think, 41 snaps, and Bucky Irving right below him with 31 snaps. Sean Tucker got just 8 snaps, if I'm not mistaken. So that 3-headed monster idea went out the window pretty quickly. But Bucky Irving, yeah, I think play him as expected. They're managing it throughout the week, and he doesn't look affected by the injury, at least the way that he's running. So I think we can continue to play him as normal. All right, let's see here. Adam in the chat says, I wish I had $1 for every time Brian shouts out Maryland alumni players. Dude, it's not very often we could do it, so I have to when we can. So let's talk about the weather. I saw one earlier comment, and I see Samuel's comment about the weather. The most recent update is that most of the heavy weather will be, I don't know, east or west of this, whatever it is. It'll miss the stadium. There will be some rain from time to time, but the total hasn't budged. And that's generally what I look for when it comes to will the weather impact this game. Total hasn't budged. It's held steady at 45.5 all day. That's actually up a half point from when we first charted the opener a couple days ago. So I wouldn't let the weather impact my decision making tonight. Generally, rain is good for offense. Offensive players know where they're going, especially in the passing game. Defensive players do not. So I know there's some worry about the weather out there. I wouldn't let it worry you. I would continue to play this game as normal, unless we get a crazy update here in the next hour that it will be an extreme downpour over the Kansas City Stadium. And Cloud in the chat, what's up? Says he's in Kansas City. The rain is very light, so thank you for that on the boots on the ground update. Not heavy at all. So yeah, play it as you normally would tonight. I would ignore the weather. Now, there are some games where we will get into, as we get into the cold weather here, there will be some games where we will dramatically play an angle of the weather. Tonight does not seem to be the case. So, all right, low-risk contest, 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads. Just have to beat half the field to double your money. Here's some core plays. This is what we can do, right? We know we like to play both quarterbacks and both running backs. However, with the split backfield in Tampa Bay as 8.5-point underdogs, we don't necessarily have to get a Tampa Bay running back into our low-risk lineup tonight. What we can do is something like this. Mahomes easily going to be the most popular captain and MVP on both sides, which if you've been just looking at fantasy football, that may be shocking considering Mahomes has not been great in fantasy this year, just 16 points per game. But Tampa Bay's defense, the state of the slate, Mahomes is going to be the most popular. And we don't want to get beat by that in low-risk contests. So we'll play Mahomes at captain. Kareem Hunt still handling the majority of the workload for the Chiefs backfield. Kelsey is 10 targets, right? 12 targets. Easily the guy here. Baker Mayfield, the other quarterback in this game. Now 3,400, generally not enough, but we could play Trey Palmer, or we could play Ryan Miller, as we talked about. You could play Ryan Miller and Harrison Butker. That is certainly an option. Ryan Miller and the Chiefs defense. You could play around with this group here, and you can get to Trey Palmer and maybe one of these other guys. So play around with it, but it's these four, I would say. And if you want to play Rachaad White over Kelsey, you certainly can. You can make it work. He's $7,400 compared to Kelsey's $8,800. Not a savings that we necessarily need to make tonight. But again, if you want to go that route, you can. So it's Mahomes, Hunt, Mayfield, one of Kelsey or Rachaad White, and then the Tampa Bay receivers, one or two of those guys, and then one of the kickers. That is the low-risk environment tonight. Now we go to FanDuel. You know the deal here. Especially here, we don't want to play Tampa Bay running back, even though they are cheaper. White 12.5, a little expensive. Bucky Irvin 10.5. Split backfield, 8.5-point underdogs. 72.50 per player with these three guys. We can fit in whether it's Ryan Miller at $5,500, Raheem Jarrett $6,500, Trey Palmer $7,500. We can make this work somehow. I think what most people will do is Ryan Miller $5,500, get his a few targets in there, and then we could play Harrison Butker, Chiefs defense. That's probably the way to go on FanDuel tonight. So low risk. Not super straightforward, but easy enough that we can make one or two decisions and have a solid low-risk lineup for tonight. And then we'll get into high risk here in a second. It's been 13 minutes so far. We'll be here till about 7:30 or so, answering questions, going over some high-risk strategies. Brian says, would you play both Kelsey and Gray? Yeah, as I said, or let's pull up the plug. I'll show you. As we saw last week, Kelsey 40 routes, Gray 26. They're both playing a lot. It's not like it's one or the other on the field. So, yeah, especially with Gray's price tag. We look at Kansas City. We see Kelsey 88, right? But Gray is only $2,800. You can easily play both those guys in your lineup. Samuel says, what are your suggestions of exactly one under 10% in each lineup? Yeah, it depends on the contest, right? If you're playing a smaller contest, you don't want more than one player under 10%. You're playing the largest GPP, you could probably have two. 3 is probably pushing it. So 1 to 2, depending on the size of the contest that you're playing. Adam says he'd still be broke if I mentioned his former school alumni and fellow Big Ten, Indiana. Yeah, not many of those guys in the league, unfortunately. So, all right, high-risk contests. The field is going to build Kansas City heavy. Let's just pull up the showdown notes from the Daily Plug. If you guys aren't members of OccupyFantasy.com, our writer Bismo does this on Mondays and Thursdays. Our jack-of-all-trades analyst Chuck does it on Sunday nights. And this is a good way to get acclimated with the slate. And because of the spread, because of the way the pricing works out, the field's going to be heavy on Kansas City tonight. So whether that's 5-1 on DraftKings or 4-2 on DraftKings or 4-1 on FanDuel, an easy way, and I think someone in the chat said it, an easy way to flip it is playing Baker Mayfield at captain or one of the receivers, playing Tampa Bay heavy. They have guys that they can use. The biggest deal is, obviously, Baker has been great when he's had Mike Evans and Godwin, and McMillan or Palmer has been number 3. Big difference when you're throwing to Sterling Shepard and Raheem Jarrett and Trey Palmer and Ryan Miller and these guys. So I get it, but you look at the ownership difference, especially on FanDuel, right? We sort by FanDuel projected MVP percentage. Can you guys see this? Yeah, you can. Mahomes basically in half of the field's lineups at MVP. Baker Mayfield in roughly 1/5, if not less, 18%. That's a pretty big discrepancy. They're ranked number 1 and number 2 in the model. Mahomes has a 5-point OF index advantage over him in our model. But Baker Mayfield at 1/3 of the ownership, essentially, I think you have to like that for tournaments. And you have so many options to pair him with. That's the other thing, right? We're looking for guys that you can pair with quarterbacks to make your lineup unique. Again, 18% is low owned, but it's still 18% of the field is going to have this guy at MVP in a 5-man lineup. Still have to think about how you're going to get different. When you have all these cheaper guys, it helps you leave salary, and it helps you get different because most of them are going to be somewhat low owned, especially on FanDuel. So I really like that approach tonight, is either playing a playing a Tampa Bay MVP or captain, and or playing Tampa Bay heavy. All right, let's see. You guys got any more questions? I will say, so Double J in the chat, what's up, man? Says not betting advice. Good disclaimer there. Took Worthy 90+ receiving yards at +900 on DK. I will say our model's a big fan. Xavier Worthy, number 2 in our model tonight, which was eye-popping for me to say the least. So Worthy at number 2. Love him as a captain tonight. 5% on DraftKings against this defense. 2% on FanDuel. If it's a lower scoring game or he catches multiple touchdowns, he could be the optimal MVP. So Xavier Worthy, I think, is probably the best high-risk captain tonight. At least that's what our model is telling us. Next, drift fishing. What about playing Irving and White together? I think their prices are too prohibitive, right? You're spending a combined, at least on DraftKings, 74 and 72. You're spending a combined 15,600 on 2 spots. Where guys who they cannibalize each other's production. If White is performing well, it's much harder for Irving to perform well because they both have to be on the field. On FanDuel, that number jumps to what? 12.5 and 10.5, right? So $23,000. You either have to build Tampa Bay heavy or not use Baker Mayfield or use Tampa Bay's defense. There's got to be a weird game script for that to happen. So it's possible. I just think you have to be extremely careful with how you put those two in the lineup together. I wouldn't, if I'm hand building, I'm not going to do that. But if I'm building 20 or 150, probably closer to 150, I would allow it and just make sure there are specific rules around those lineups that include both of those guys. Yeah, and Tricky Ricky, what's up, man? Says Hopkins for high-risk captain. Yeah, I think you have to like that, too, with the leap of faith that he gets more run tonight. They said they want to use him in that Rashee Rice, Juju Smith-Schuster role. Maybe another week in the playbook will get him there. Let's look at our Occupy model. Let's see DeAndre Hopkins, 7% on DraftKings, 2% on FanDuel. He certainly qualifies as well as a low-owned captain. I mean, again, if Mahomes does what he's been doing, he will not be worth 30% captain on DraftKings, 48% on FanDuel. But because he's high owned, it means he will inevitably do those things. So, but I think there are so many under 10% guys that are great pivots. Hopkins and Worthy are certainly 2 of them. Eli says, would I play Jarrett or Miller if I had to pick one in large field? I mean, I'm falling in love with the propaganda. I will read between the lines, or just not even between the lines, flat out what the players and coaching staff are saying. They love Raheem Jarrett. So I'll say Raheem Jarrett. Not just because he went to Maryland, but because he's picking up steam and has been productive whenever he's been on the field. The biggest issue, he's had injuries. I think he had 2 catches, 37 yards in their preseason opener before hurting his knee. Had over 40 yards receiving in one game last year before hurting himself. So if he can stay healthy, what he seemingly is tonight, he's a guy that, again, he was on the field in that late drive to try to tie the game last week. They seem to trust him, or at least Baker seems to trust him. And their wide receiver core is depleted. So giving you guys all the Raheem Jarrett propaganda. $2,000 on DraftKings, $6,500 on FanDuel. Let's see last week. I'll just pull him up for you here. Raheem Jarrett. He'll be a 5th of the ownership, if not a 10th of the ownership of Ryan Miller. Yeah, 3 for 58 last week. Pretty impressive. Yes, I see someone with specific lineup questions. I'm not going to answer specific lineup questions. Depends on the contest, and I can't do that for everyone, so apologies. I'm not going to be able to do that. Trying to answer questions here that can help multiple people. Hawk Dark is getting kind of crazy. It's a large field Jarrett captain. I mean, that's North Korean level propaganda if you want to go that route, but go for it. Could lead the team in receiving tonight. Could lead the game in receiving. Who knows? If Worthy is captain, do you also play Patrick Mahomes? So in roughly 100% of winning DraftKings lineups where the wide receiver has been captain, you either have his own team quarterback. I'll just show you here. So if Worthy is the optimal captain, let's put him in the captain spot for Christ's sakes. There he is. 100% of the time, it is either his own team's quarterback, it is the opposite quarterback, and generally it's the opposite quarterback when this opposite quarterback can run a lot. Mayfield's run a little bit more this year than we expected, but he's not like a Lamar Jackson type to outscore Mahomes. I don't think this will happen. It could, because Worthy does get some end rounds. So it's more possible tonight. Or the Chiefs defense, the own team defense. Those are the 3 ways when a receiver is optimal captain. Those are the guys you have to play. One of those 3, at least one of those 3. So I don't think you necessarily have to play Mahomes, especially if you're in the largest contest. A great way to get different is not pairing the team quarterback with your captain. So if you're playing Worthy in a large field GPP and you like Mayfield, you like the price savings, I guess it's only $400, but you can see some ways it gets there. Not required. Is it the most likely to happen? No. The most likely is he's paired with Patrick Mahomes if he's optimal captain. but you can get different by playing Mayfield or Chiefs defense with him. On FanDuel, you said any player under 7,500. This is for low risk contest, by the way. I guess Samuel was asking if they're chalk. What is considered chalk at that price above 3%? Yeah, let's just look at our Occupy model here, and we look at FanDuel sort. Nope, that's Yahoo for some reason. All right, FanDuel. We see Noah Gray 16%, right? And then Trey Palmer is 7,500, 34%. Those are two guys that stick out. So if you're playing low risk on FanDuel, you really only want Noah Gray or Trey Palmer, it looks like. I guess you could play Ryan Miller. We have him at 8%. That is significant enough. It's over 5%. So one of those three would be the guys in low risk to play. Difference between Otton and Kelsey captain ownership. Right now, our Occupy model has Otton at 6%, Kelsey at 21%. So more than 3 times the ownership on Travis Kelsey. So if you think Otton can repeat last week, I'm not sure he can. But if he can, you get a massive captain ownership discount on him. So not a bad. In fact, it's probably a good high-risk tournament play, Otton at captain. I don't know why it's obsessed when I talk about captain, trying to put the guy in the flex spot. There we go, in the captain spot. Brian, great name, spelled it correctly. What's up, man? Would you throw in defenses in higher risk? I love playing defense in high risk. Very rarely does it work out this year, but I think we have both definitely under 20%. Chiefs D 16%, Bucks D under, yeah, just 5% Bucks D. Mahomes just does not turn the ball over enough, really. Doesn't make enough boneheaded plays. It's really hard for the opposing defense to get there, but anything can happen, especially if this weather gets crazier than we expect. I don't think it will be. But Chiefs defense is probably the best of the two, but they are 3 times higher owned. So Shepard or Jarrett? I mean, Shepard is the most likely play here. Again, I think for high-risk contests, I really like Raheem Jarrett. So Jarrett goes off, you guys can thank me. If not, don't blame me. But Raheem Jarrett is a guy that I'm thinking takes a leap tonight, especially Shepard dealing with that hamstring, and he's more of a low average depth of target guy. But you got to remember, Tampa Bay is 8.5-point underdogs here. Mayfield's without his top 3 targets. So it could be rough sledding for them. Definitely could be. All right, guys, let's get these final questions in now. 5 minutes left. I'll stay here, and then I'm going to eat some dinner, finish up my lineups, and we'll get going. Normally, I ask you guys to subscribe here, but we're actually at 10,000 subscribers. Don't stop subscribing, I guess. But 10,000 subscribers, which appreciate all of you for doing that. While I wait for some more questions to get in, I'll talk a little bit about this. We're going to do a 10K subscriber giveaway here on YouTube. If you're already subscribed, you are already entered into the giveaway. If you've seen the Onyx gifts on DraftKings, we're going to do something similar to that where we'll have like 3 or 5, in our opinion, really nice gifts that whoever wins, and maybe we'll do multiple winners, we'll see. Whoever wins will get to choose from those gifts. So really excited about that. We'll have some more info here in the next week or two. Instead of asking you guys to subscribe tonight, I know if you're like me, you're probably sick and tired of political ads on TV. I totally understand. I mean, every single ad is a political ad, and it seems like we have just one more day for it. So instead of asking you to subscribe, I'm just going to ask you to go out and vote tomorrow if you haven't already. I'm not going to turn this political, but just go out and vote. If you have the ability to and you haven't already, go vote. We have 2 choices. Either let things happen and not have a say in it, or we have a say in it. And if you're like me in a state where your presidential vote doesn't matter, I understand. But you can make a bigger impact voting in state ballot questions, local initiatives. A lot of the stuff that actually impacts your life is on those local votes that happen tomorrow. So go out and vote. And if you don't know anything about it, I understand. Ballotpedia is a great resource. It's free. I did it today to check up on some of the local elections and some of the ballot initiatives that are on my ballot tomorrow. Really great way. I don't know who some of these people are. You can do a quick search. Who are the candidates for this local school board or local district? Really easy to find who aligns with your values. So instead of asking you guys to subscribe, just go vote tomorrow. Appreciate that. All right, final questions. Let's get them in here now. Lots of Raheem Jarrett propaganda. So as many political ads we've seen on TV, I'm trying to replicate that with Raheem Jarrett propaganda here on my stream. So 4 minutes left. Let's get these final questions in. What do you think is the highest point lineup on average? I don't even know what that means. I'm not even sure what that means. Nano says, is Worthy having a good game? Hope so. Hope so. The model likes him a lot. He's at lower ownership. Hasn't had many good games. Let's just pull up his game logs just so we can look at it really quickly. Yeah, his best game was in prime time in week 1, a long time ago, it feels like, in that game against Baltimore. So, model really loves him tonight. Again, I was really shocked to see him at number 2 in the model today. So, clearly the model is picking up on something. I'm not going to answer Trump or Kamala, but Andre says Trump or Kamala. DK captain, if we base it on the betting markets, Trump's going to have higher ownership. We know we're always going with the lower owned play here, so come on. Peter says, would you play the triangle of Kelsey and Otten and Gray in one lineup, or is that too much? I don't think it's too much, right? Especially we don't trust these receivers. We play something like this. I'm not saying we do this, but like something like this. Kelsey, Otten. I mean, if these guys combine for 20 targets again, and then we need a cheaper play in Noah Gray. Let's see where he is. Again, I don't necessarily think about it this way. Generally, not trying to play 3 tight ends on purpose. But if these 2 guys are effectively the number 1 receiving options for their respective teams, and we need a cheaper option to fit in, again, Gray doesn't have the ceiling in this spot. I think you can do it. Again, it's not something you try to do, but it is a rare slate where you probably could play 3 tight ends and be okay. Tricky Ricky, in high risk, should I play the Chiefs running back? I mean, it depends on the build. I think, can Hunt outscore Mahomes? Yes, absolutely. So I think if you're not playing Mahomes, really you're playing Hunt if you're playing him instead of Mahomes, or you're playing like a 5-1 Chief stack or 4-2 Chief stack, which is what the field is going to do. So I think if you want to get different, you play one or the other. Our model, let's see if we pull up our model on DraftKings. It's not as high on Hunt, especially at $9,800. He's not even playing 90 or 100% of the snaps. That's the biggest issue with Hunt here, especially in large field GPPs. At his price tag is really elevated this week, and P. Ryan is still taking passing down work. So it makes it tougher to Hunt to really hit a ceiling unless it's a lower scoring game or he vultures probably 2 touchdowns. So yeah, but understand he's much lower owned than Mahomes, basically half the ownership. So keep that in mind too. Juan, what's up, Juan? Says, is it better to pair defense with opponent's kickers or defense with opponent running backs? Generally, neither one's work that often, but you rarely actually see opposing defense versus opposing kicker. So something like this. Let me see. So like Bucker and Buccaneers, the old Buck stack. This rarely works. Whatever reason, I think you can tell yourself a story why it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And while opposing running back versus defense seems pretty bad too, this actually hits at a much higher rate than opposing kicker. So something like this actually hits at a much higher rate than opposing kicker. So if you're choosing between the two or you're allowing a rule in your lineup, I would go this route. I think we got most of it all. Chris says, how risky is it to fade worthy? What's up, Chris? Chris is a member of the channel, longtime supporter and member. What's up, Chris? I don't think it's risky because he hasn't had that big of a game so far. It's risky in terms of what the model is telling us, but in terms of projected ownership, in terms of his on-field production so far, in terms of DeAndre Hopkins potentially taking over as a wide receiver one, it's not that risky. It's really a risk-reward proposition on if we want to play worthy in our high-risk lineups. So I don't think it's super risky to fade him. It's not like he's going to kill you, but if you're playing multiple lineups, maybe you make one with worthy at captain. Peter says Irving or White on the Tampa side. I lean Rachaad White, playing more snaps and doesn't have the toe injury, so I'll say Rachaad White. All right, guys, 7:30. That'll do it. Appreciate you. Daily Plug is up and will be updated one more time with the Tampa Bay wide receiver news. It might already be updated. Let me see if Bismo updated it just yet. Yeah, he did. Yeah. And look, unprompted, Bismo, our writer, says Jarrett gets a sizable bump. There's your final Jarrett propaganda. It's on screen on the site. I didn't even commission this. Bismo did, so shout out Bismo. It's Ricky Jarrett's, not Ricky Jarrett. That is Ballers. Raheem Jarrett season. Ricky Jarrett, legendary wide receiver on the TV show Ballers, but Raheem Jarrett gets a sizable bump. All right, guys. A lot of 1v1 questions on Tampa receivers. It's a shit show. Any of these guys could lead in snaps or targets or air yards or touchdowns. I'm going with Jarrett as the lowest owned of the group. That's a simple way to break the tie for me. Palmer projects the best. He is the highest owned. Shepard is the veteran. We'll probably see I would say Shepard has the best chance of scoring more than 0 points. Ryan Miller may be next, and Jared is the lowest owned, highest upside of the group. All right, guys, appreciate it. Daily plugs up, it's updated. Occupy model is up and updated. Lineup builder is up and updated. You still have 45 minutes to build lineups. So I appreciate everyone tuning in as always. Again, we're going to get these videos out earlier in the day, 90% of the time. There will be some times where we do these live streams. So just to make sure you don't miss them, subscribe to the channel. It's free to do so. Get yourself entered into that 10K subscriber giveaway. And you'll get notified when we go live or upload videos. So appreciate everyone watching. Good luck tonight and enjoy Chiefs and Bucks.